Start investing in gold and silver today at sdbullion.com and join the over 35,000 precious metal investors who have made the switch to the lowest gold and silver prices in the industry. SD Bullion recently claimed a spot on the prestigious Inc. 500, making them one of the fastest-growing bullion companies in the United States. With low bullion prices and over-the-top customer service, SD Bullion is setting the standard for precious metals transactions. Visit www.sdbullion.com today and start saving on every precious metals purchase you make.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah Johnson with FinanceAndLiberty.com, and with us today is Mike Rivero from WhatReallyHappened.com. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me again.
All right. Well, I first wanted to discuss what your expectations are for a Trump presidency, because I know you were, even in the primary saying that Trump is basically, he actually is anti-establishment. He's the person we need as president. And you said right after the election, the American people basically said, you're fired to the oligarchic establishment. So can you discuss what you think did you want to first discuss how historic this whole election cycle was? And then what do you think a Trump presidency will bring?
Well, the significance of Trump's victory is that, as was the case in the Brexit vote, a massive popular landslide was able to overcome massive election fraud that was taking place. We were able to overcome the propaganda from the corporate media. And basically, the upset we're seeing within the corporate media and the establishment is, how dare you peasants revolt and vote for the person that we didn't want. And in a lot of ways, they're behaving like spoiled children. We saw the rioting in the streets. Jill Stein's recounts, which have backfired horribly because the recounts uncovered massive pro-Hillary election fraud in both Michigan and Wisconsin. Then there was the attempt to threaten the electors, to throw the Electoral College. And as of right now, the results that have come on in are showing that the Electoral College is in fact voting in accord with the results of their state. There are no surprises. So that too appears to be failing. And it really does signal a transition from what I call the narcocracy, which has held this country in its grip for 30 years. Now, Donald Trump by himself is not going to be able to bring about any change. But what Donald Trump's presidency represents is an opportunity for everybody who's working for change to be able to actually bring some of that change about without an obstructionist president. But of course, Donald Trump going on in, the establishment is trying to delegitimize him. They're trying to basically rig the system against him. We're already hearing where Democrats are going to try and impeach him on January 21st. Purely on the basis that he is so successful in the private sector and has so much money. Of course, he's going to be corrupt, as opposed to the career politicians who are wealthy on the basis of their donors and backers and so forth and so on. It's a ridiculous idea, but it does show that Donald Trump is facing an obstructionist Congress and an openly hostile media and now an openly hostile CIA. And apparently Trump has decided he's going to keep his private security around him in addition to the Secret Service. It's a very smart thing to do. Trump has to realize he's going into the White House with as many elements of the establishment opposed to him as was the case with John F. Kennedy. And so at this point, especially given the assassination that just took place over in Turkey, Trump has to realize he is a target for everybody that he's a threat to. And that includes Israel's control over our government, the military-industrial complex, which still lusts for World War III, the narcocracy, which is afraid of some serious jail time and loss of revenue. Again, by himself, Trump isn't going to be able to do anything. We, the American people, are going to have to stand shoulder to shoulder with him and glare through those windows into the offices of the House of Representatives and the Senate and send them a clear message that if they don't start acting like representatives of the American people instead of being representatives of Israel, the military industrial complex, big oil, big pharma, and so forth. We will do to them next election what we did to Hillary Clinton this time. And it's a serious message. They're going to have to be paying attention to it, because the old wisdom that simply having a huge amount of money to spend and election fraud on your side will deliver you into your office, that has been upended by this victory. Hillary Clinton spent more money on her presidential campaign than any candidate in history. And plus, there was the massive election fraud, illegal immigrants voting, and she still couldn't overcome a landslide by the American people. And frankly, the thrashing around by the Democrats and the liberals since then is doing tremendous damage to the United States public image around the world. They're laughing at us right now. For so many decades, the United States postured as being the leader of the free world and the shining light bastion of democracy and human rights. And that's all falling apart right now. We're going to be decades recovering our nation's reputation from the behavior of Hillary's supporters over these last few weeks.
Now, you're talking about how Trump by himself can't really fix the system and that the American people need to stand up. Can you expand a little bit on ways in which we can stand up?
Well, let me give you two examples of what I'm talking about. The first has to do with the fact that our election system is incredibly crooked, and it is literally designed to facilitate election fraud and conceal it, with all these electronic machines and tabulation centers and ballots being counted out of sight. And so we've never been able to change the system because those in power benefited from that system. Following the debacle in Florida back in 2000, the government was saying, yes, we're going to fix the election system. We're going to fix the election system. They didn't do a single thing about it because they all profit from that system being available for them to use to hang on to power. And election fraud is not just a problem with our presidential elections, but also members of Congress. There are people who are still in Congress, and the voters in the home state say, I don't understand how this person won another term in office when everybody I know seems to not like this person. So that's a real issue. But now we have a president coming on in who's aware of the fact that there's a problem with our election system. He did not benefit from it. He understands it will be arrayed against him 4 years from now. And so now those that are working to overhaul our election system and revamp it and turn it into something that we can actually have trust and confidence in again, we now have a friend in the White House who is of the same mindset. The same thing goes with the issue of the corporate media's monopoly on information flow. That has been seriously eroded. All of the corporate media's lies from the past are coming back to haunt them, and they're out there screaming, we're the real news and they're the fake news and you can't pay attention to us. And now all of a sudden we have a president going into the White House who clearly is going to bypass the corporate media. He is not going to allow them to be the conduits of what he needs to say to the American people. Donald Trump is going directly to the American people through Twitter, through his YouTube channel. His son-in-law is starting a new media company that I'm sure will get favorable treatment at the White House press office. Donald Trump has gone directly to the independent media like Alex Jones to get his message out. Trump knows the corporate media is not his friend. And so I'm seeing that 2017 is going to be a major year where the independent media is going to be recognized as a major influence. And a lot of observers around the world had already come to that conclusion. But the entrenched political establishment of the U.S. and the corporate media were still living in this dream world earlier this year that they were totally in control of the minds of America, and the independent media, oh, they're just those flaky kids out there and we can ignore them. They're not a problem. And all of a sudden the election results was the watershed moment, the wake-up call, the ice bucket challenge in the face, where they realized finally they actually have lost control over what Americans are thinking about their country and their leadership. So it's going to be an opportunity for the independent media to grow into a major component of the information flow in our society. the corporate media is in serious trouble because their entire business model for decades upon decades has been being very highly paid to be very convincing liars. They can't change that business model, or they're going to have to give up those $1 million paychecks. And so they're in trouble. I mean, the New York Times is literally vacating 8 floors of their own building to turn them into rental properties. We're hearing about other media outlets are having to let huge amounts of staff go. And they're all up there saying it's all the fault of the independent media and it's all the fault of the Russians. It's a Russian plot to undermine confidence in the American corporate media. And the more they scream and cry and get hysterical, the more rapid the erosion of trust and faith in the corporate media and the government becomes. As of the last poll I saw, only 6% of Americans still trust the corporate media is telling them the truth. And I imagine that's the 6% of Americans who are not skilled in the use of computers.
Now, what is your perspective on the kind of attack on the independent media and the alternative media? Because recently, this was a couple weeks ago, actually, the Washington Post put out an article that it cited propornot.org, and which basically compiled a list of 200 websites that they were, red flagging, quote unquote, red flagging as Russian propaganda outlets or websites that were echoing Russian propaganda. And actually, your website was one of them. So what is your perspective on this, labeling of, different alternative media websites? What is your perspective on this attack on the alternative media?
Well, it was an act of utter desperation. It's red baiting. It's McCarthyism. And Proper Not went to great lengths to conceal who they really are. And it turns out it filters back to these liberal establishment, George Soros funded, CIA connected. And it really didn't work because ultimately the Washington Post had to kind of back away from the story and say, well, we're reporting what Proper Not says. We're not endorsing it because there is no actual evidence. And as it turned out, Proper Not updated their report, and their sole criteria to denounce a website as being part of the Russian Ministry of Propaganda was that we linked to articles in Russia Today. That was the entire criteria. And so that one kind of fell apart on them real quickly. But it's a panic reaction because, again, the corporate media is trapped by their business model. So in a way, so is the government. They can't start telling the truth because when the American people, and it's already starting to happen, when the American people comprehend the massive lying and propaganda that they have been surrounded with as they grow up, when they see the scale of the lies, that is definitely going to bring the government and the corporate media down. In a lot of ways, it's strongly similar to what went on in the Soviet Union leading up to their collapse, where the Soviet citizens started crowdsourcing information and news amongst themselves using fax machines. And the system was called the samizdat. They didn't have an internet like we do today, but just using fax machines, they began to report and educate to themselves. And Pravda and Izvestia were exposed for constant lying to the Russian people. And the Politburo, the Kremlin, were exposed as constantly lying to the Russian people. And once a population comes to understand that these institutions really are surviving through lies, fraud, and deception, collapse is not far away. And even though I see an opportunity with Donald Trump in the White House to reverse the course of this nation and get us headed back toward being a constitutional republic with an honestly democratically elected government, we may still be headed for a Soviet Union-style collapse of our entire government corporate structure. And then we're going to have to go through what the Russian people did. It's going to be rough for a few months. Then we'll form a new republic and life will be a lot better, as has been the case in Russia.
What is your perspective on what the CIA is doing right now? Because I know you've said that the CIA is really trying to take down Trump as a president. What is your perspective on what the CIA is doing right now?
Well, the CIA has always been operating in a state of roguishness, if you will, even going all the way back to Harry Truman. We've had presidents and high officials who are all very concerned about this intelligence agency that was just doing what it wanted to do. It was answerable to nobody in reality. that they hid so much. And one of the factors why the CIA is so dead set against Donald Trump and is so supportive of Hillary Clinton goes back about 30 years to a CIA operation called Screw Worm. And this was the CIA's operation to smuggle untraceable military weapons down to the Contras in Nicaragua. This was a violation of the Boland Amendment, which said the U.S. is not going to be covertly interfering in other countries anymore because they've been caught doing it so much. And it was a violation of the Logan Act because the CIA was engaging in foreign policy outside the official offices of the White House and the State Department. So unable to get taxpayer money for this, the Central Intelligence Agency funded this entire operation through cocaine sales. And the same smuggling route that was taking the guns down to Nicaragua was bringing tens of tons of cocaine back into the United States to be sold to our children. Now, the northern end of this pipeline was in the state of Arkansas under then Governor Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton provided security for the operation. He kept the state drug investigators away from the airfields that were being used by this smuggling operation. And Hillary Clinton at the Rose Law Firm set up this money laundry to process all the money. And it went through banks like Madison Guaranty, land flips like Whitewater, Castle Grand, Flowerwood. And ultimately, after the money was laundered, it was being paid out to the suppliers of the guns and other supplies for the Contras through an Arkansas state agency called the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, created by Arkansas Act 1082, which was written by Webb Hubbell and signed into law by Bill Clinton. So the Clintons were involved in this, so were the Bushes. In fact, this was all being directed by then Vice President George Herbert Walker Bush from the White House, but it was never official White House policy. So the Bushes and Clintons are at the top of the CIA drug cartel, and their plan had been to basically be a ruling duopoly over the United States, handing the White House back from Bush to Clinton to Clinton to Bush to Bush to Clinton. Obama got inside on them on 2008, but he was okay with what was going on, so he had his 8 years. And this election, 2016, was supposed to be Jeb Bush versus Hillary Clinton, so it didn't matter how the voters voted, the narcocracy would proceed unimpeded. But Jeb Bush couldn't connect with the voters. He could never get rid of that deer in the headlight look in his eyes. Plus, at this stage of history, the Bush name is not a well-liked one among the American people, with all the revelations about lying us into wars and the use of torture. So Donald Trump is your classic reactionary president. He was put forward by the American people who are just sick and tired of politics as usual. And despite all the media efforts and all the government interference, Donald Trump prevailed, and he won the election. And he's, like I said, so far there are no surprises from the Electoral College voting. And the old establishment, up to its neck in drug money corruption, they're seriously scared, because without the power of the White House to direct the FBI and the Department of Justice to not look at certain things like the Clinton Foundation, this could all start unraveling. In fact, I would not be at all surprised once the Electoral College is over that there will be a serious attempt on Trump's life. I'm surprised that there weren't more of them during the primaries and the general election. And we might see some of these Clintons and Bushes simply say, I'm retiring, and they skedaddle off to someplace without extradition.
Now, what is your perspective on whether Trump will actually, during the campaign, he was saying he's going to put an independent prosecutor in to look into Hillary Clinton's case, the Hillary Clinton's private email case. What is your perspective? Do you think he'll actually do that? Because it seems like he's kind of backing off now. Is he doing that just to play it safe until he's in office? Or what is your perspective on if he's actually going to prosecute these people?
That's part of it. Because Trump, there were 3 attempts on his life during the campaign. One with what appeared to be sabotage to his campaign aircraft, and then 2 other incidents involving firearms. One was a firearm, one was a knife. But I think Trump was trying to play it safe. He's also trying to deflect accusations that he's out for revenge. And he's saying, you know, I'm not out for revenge. What Hillary and their people did is a low priority, but that's not exactly the same thing as saying Trump won't prosecute. In fact, the New York Times story that announced Trump was not going to prosecute Hillary Clinton had to be retracted because when the transcript of the actual interview came on out, Trump made it very clear that investigations will continue into Hillary's email server and the Clinton Foundation. And we heard only last week that the FBI's investigation into the foundation is in fact continuing. So is the investigation by the Internal Revenue Service as to whether it really qualifies as a tax-exempt charitable foundation. And I think Trump wants to sort of hold himself above it all, but at the same time, he's going to be cheering on Trey Gowdy, who is still making tremendous progress in trying to expose all of this. And the heart of all that corruption, the hub of this horrible web, is in that Clinton Foundation, which it appears to be a giant slush fund, tax avoidance scheme, and giant money laundry. And there is an anonymous source within the FBI who's been posting on the net saying that all of the top officials in the U.S. federal government have been dipping into that Clinton Foundation. They're all dirty with that money. And that's why they're all trying to unite against Donald Trump, because all it's going to take is a few of those people making deals with the prosecutors, and it's going to start unraveling all the way down to the ground.
You know, Trump isn't president yet, and you've talked about how it looks like the Electoral College is going to vote his way, but he still has about 1 month, almost exactly 1 month until Inauguration Day. So between now and then, what can our viewers do to kind of stand up and say, we don't want the presidency taken away from him?
Well, just do exactly that. Post on social media, Trump is our president, and the whiners and crybabies need to accept that and go away, and point out where the media and the political establishment have just done this amazing 180 degrees from back when Trump first suggested, there might be questions with the integrity of the election process. And they all said, oh, he's whining. How could you possibly think that there's anything crooked about our elections? And now that he's won, they're out there screaming, this election was rigged by Russia to steal it from Hillary, and we've got to... And just point out the hypocrisies and inaccuracies in what they're saying. Because one of the big problems the U.S. government has been dealing with. Propaganda against the American people by the government was legalized back in 2013 by the Congress. It was going on all along, but in 2013, Congress said, yeah, it's okay for the government to propagandize the American people, to sell them wars and so forth and so on. Because we didn't have an established, unified propaganda ministry, the propaganda was subcontracted out to advertising agencies and public relations firms. Now, these are businesses that are not used to thinking in long time spans. It's a 30-second commercial, a 60-second commercial, maybe a campaign that runs a few weeks, and then the slate is wiped and they move forward. And because of that, the propaganda that has been coming out of the corporate media and the U.S. government is disjointed and quite often self-contradictory, and that's been a major, major factor in the erosion of trust of the American people, where they're saying, wait a minute, you're telling us X today, only 2 weeks ago you said it was Y. And all they get back from the corporate media and the government is, well, forget about Y and think about X. X is what we're talking about this week. We wish you people would have amnesia and not remember all those other things.
Well, Mike Rivero, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we let you go, did you want to share with the viewers any last thoughts you had and where they can find you online?
Well, where you can find me online is whatreallyhappened.com, which is my website. We're coming up on our 23rd birthday on that one. If you have difficulty reaching it, it's because Hillary's hackers are still attacking my site furiously. I don't know if it portends something unfortunate happening or if they're just throwing tantrums and expressing their rage and frustration. You can also hear my daily talk radio show on the Republic Broadcasting Network between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. Central U.S. time. And we'll just have more of the same there as well. But right now, the important thing to understand is there literally is a revolution taking place in this country. It is a virtual revolution. It is taking place in cyberspace, which means people don't get shot and killed and bloody in the process. But it's no less a revolution. And it looks like the revolution is winning at this point. What the other side is willing to do to cling to power, of course, remains unknown. But one thing we should all keep in mind is they're feeling very cornered, and nothing is more dangerous than a cornered animal.
Once again, Mike Rivero, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me again.